In this video, we're going to discuss kinetic and potential energy and how to calculate these. You studied this in middle school. This hopefully is a review, but yes, I know we are doing math and science class, so this is going to throw some of you for a loop. Don't worry, we're going to practice a lot of these problems, and you will always have a calculator and the formulas whenever I ask you to do any of these problems. This video is part 1 out of 2 videos focusing on kinetic energy. Kinetic energy, we said, was the energy of motion. The equation for kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared. Please make sure you have this equation down. Remember I said you will always have the equation. Here's the equation for you. Remember this tiny 2 means squared. So this actually means velocity times velocity. That's what this little 2 means here. Please know that kinetic energy has the symbol of Ke and always has the unit of joules. That is the capital J. Mass has a symbol of an M and always has the units kilogram. And velocity has the symbol of a V and always has the units of meters per second. Make sure you have what each symbol means and the units for each symbol written down in your notes. These will be very, very important later. You will have to calculate kinetic energy, but you'll also have to calculate mass given some of the other variables. So let's talk about this equation and how we can solve it for mass. You've already done this year in algebra, discussed how to solve for variables, but I'm just going to give you the shortcut right now. If you would like to know how you can solve it, come talk to me in class and I'll be happy to show you. Or you can just write down in your notes, write down that kinetic energy solved for mass has the formula of 2Ke divided by velocity squared. So this is the equation solved for mass. Make sure to write this down in your notes in that box. And when we do some kinetic energy problems later, you're going to be all set to go. All right. Whenever we're solving any word problem, especially here in science, we're going to follow these 6 steps. Very important steps right here. We're going to follow these every single time. You're going to see me refer to these 6 steps over and over again. These steps for solving equations are 1. Identify what the question is asking. 2. Identify the variables. 3. Write the equation. 4. Insert the known variables into the equation. 5. And solve. 6. Double check your units. On a test, if you do steps 1 through 3, you will actually get majority of the credit for this problem. If you do step 4, you're going to get even more credit. Step 5 is probably the least important in my book, and step 6 is extremely important, especially this word right here saying units. If you do not have units, you will lose points every single time. So let's use these steps to solve some kinetic energy problems. Let's start with the first problem. What is the kinetic energy of a 45 kilogram object moving at 13 meters per second? All right, let's see this problem here. First step says to identify what the question is asking. What am I trying to solve for? I know this is a kinetic energy problem, so I'm going to be able to list my variables right now. Ke, M, and V. What am I trying to solve? The problem says, what is the kinetic energy? So what am I trying to find? Kinetic energy. Step number 2 says identify what we know. Mass has a unit of kilograms. So I'm going to find kilograms in my problem, and see that I have the number 45 for it. So I know my mass is 45 kilograms. This is why I said those units are so important, and make sure you know these. Next is velocity. We said that the units for velocity are meters per second. That's m/s. And I see that I have 13 meters per second here. Step number 3 says write the equation. So I'm going to get this equation directly from my notes. KE equals 1/2 mv squared. And if you're a visual color person right now, I'm going to change these into the colors I have been using for mass and velocity. So step number 4 says to put in the known variables. Remember, I'm trying to find KE. So I'm going to leave that as the symbols right now. I'm going to change this 1/2 to 0.5. Because when I enter this in my calculator, I'm not going to enter in 1/2. I'm going to enter in 0.5. I said that my mass was 45 and my velocity was 13. Remember that this tiny 2 right here means that velocity is squared, so I need to enter 13 twice into my calculator to get it squared. Step number 5 says to solve, so I'm going to type into my calculator 0.5 times 45 times 13 times 13. And I'm going to get back from my calculator that kinetic energy equals 3,802.5. Am I done? Hopefully you told me no, I'm not done, because I haven't done number 6. I haven't double checked my work to make sure I plugged things in correctly. I squared velocity. I look good to go, but I do not have a unit, so I would lose points on a test or on a worksheet. Remember that the units for kinetic energy is joules, so I'm going to write a capital J. It would make life so much easier for me grading if you could remember to circle or box your answer when you're done. All right, one practice problem down. Let's continue on and try a second one. Determine the kinetic energy of a 500 kilogram roller coaster train which moves at a speed of 20 meters per second. Step 1 says identify what the question is asking. I see this word determine. So I'm going to follow that word and I'm going to see that it says determine the kinetic energy. So I am trying to find kinetic energy. Next says identify the variables that you know. KE equals 1/2 times mass. I know that my mass unit is kilograms. So I see kilograms right here, and I'm going to know that my mass is 500 kilograms. And our last variable is velocity. I'm going to look for my velocity units of meters per second, m/s, and I'm going to see that I have 20 meters per second. Step number 3 says write the equation. KE equals 1/2 times my mass times my velocity squared. And I'm going to follow on to step number 4 right now, which says identify the known variables, and I'm going to insert them in. So I'm trying to find KE, that's going to remain as letters. I'm going to change this 0.5, this 1/2 to 0.5 to get ready to type it into my calculator. I'm going to write that my mass identified as being 500 kilograms, and my velocity identified as being 20 meters per second. And I'm going to write this velocity twice because it is squared. I'm going to take all these numbers, 1/2 times 500 times 20 times 20, and I type that into my calculator, and I find out that kinetic energy for this roller coaster would be 100,000. And I need to remember to include my units of a capital J for joules. Alright, not too bad. Hopefully you're starting to get the hang of it. Let's do one last problem. A man with a kinetic energy of 440 joules runs at a speed of 4 meters per second. What is the mass of the man? Alright, step 1 in solving problems says to identify what I am trying to solve. So I see this word what, I'm going to follow it, and it says what is the mass of the man. So I know I am trying to find mass. Let's identify what I do know. I know that kinetic energy has 440 joules. Remember that my units of kinetic energy is joules. So I know that KE equals 440 joules. And I also know that my velocity equals 4 meters per second. My units for velocity is meters per second. So I've identified all my known variables. Time for me to write that equation. I'm going to use my mass equals equation because I'm trying to solve for mass. And I'm going to look back at my notes, and I'm going to see that mass equals 2 times my kinetic energy. If you write out the equation like this every single time, I'm able to give you partial credit if you make a simple mistake somewhere, divided by velocity squared. Step number 4 says plug in my known variables. So mass I'm trying to find. I know that I have 2 times my kinetic energy, which is 440, divided by my velocity squared. And remember that squared just means multiply the number by itself, 4 times 4. And I enter this into my calculator, and I determine that my mass of the man is 55. And now I need to add units. My units for mass is kilograms. Hopefully at this point you have some basic understanding of how to calculate kinetic energy. We're going to continue on practicing with this. Get ready, because here it comes.